Have you been feeling messianic lately? Do you feel like you could potentially be the Messiah? Do you have a Messiah complex?
In today's discourse episode, Connor and I discuss exactly that. We go over the Messiah complex, arrogance, patronizing complexes, neuroses, and just the human predilection to sometimes think that you're the best.
And your cross awaits you in this episode.
Be ready to die on it. We also discuss how you can avoid it and also how to integrate the Messiah complex a little bit better into your day-to-day. So we hope you enjoy the episode. Let's jump in.
What would it take for you to believe someone if they told you they were the Messiah, sent here to save the earth?
I don't know,
Because I'm
man.
sure people felt weird about Jesus, right? We know for sure.
I don't know, man. I think you'd have to be able to like touch me on the temple or something with your index finger and almost like, have you ever seen Doctor Strange? The Marvel
No,
movie?
I haven't.
Okay, basically like that. Like you have to be able to touch me and like send me on a full-on psychedelic journey with just your fingertip.
Yeah.
Maybe.
But shamans can do. Have you ever heard about the fire dance in indigenous tribes?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard of some weird stuff
Where
like
the shaman runs around the fire for 24 hours and then rubs his sweat on your forehead and no psychedelics involved. You're having a full-on trip.
It's wild.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. Maybe you'd have to like be able to snap your fingers and like.
So walking on water isn't good enough for you?
No way. People walking. Dude, have you seen David Blaine?
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Obviously,
that's a good point.
somehow the shit can happen.
Yeah.
But nah, man, I don't know. I think that there has to be some sort of magical prowess that this person has. But that's a great question, right? It's like when the Messiah comes, is it going to be just like a human being who carries humanity into the next epoch of time where we're just like more enlightened beings? Or is the Messiah supposed to be God manifest in the flesh to the point where miracles can occur? You know, they can snap their finger and cause an implosion over there, or a black hole over there, or I don't know, teleport, or who knows what the craziness would be. I don't know what the Messiah is supposed to look like. I have no idea.
Yeah, well, okay, but to what degree do you think the Messiah is just an archetype that some people throughout their life, you know, embody or hit on?
Like, I think from a fundamental religious perspective, maybe you know, I know there's when you study things like Christian esotericism and you get into some really cool stuff from like Rudolf Steiner's anthroposophy, or you jump into more Kabbalistic stuff, more Judaic things. Christ consciousness is like this understanding of that. It's sort of like an archetype, a state of being, a psychological mode that we can get into through meditation or training or honing the vessels and the vehicles of the soul.
And how is that different from the man who just took LSD for his first time and says, I am God? Here I am. Lo and behold.
Right? Everybody and their mom pops a tab of acid, and all of a sudden they're God, nobody else exists, and they're in a solipsistic sort of mind fuck.
Yeah.
That they have to slowly climb out of this
6
foot deep, 10-foot deep hole that they sort of found themselves in, woke up inside of Plato's cave, maybe.
Right.
And they're like, oh, I have to somehow discern these things. I don't know. Your question was how different is it?
Why is it different?
The Christ consciousness thing?
Yeah.
I think it's very similar.
Yeah.
I think so. Earlier in another episode, we talked about Ken Wilber's philosophy of states and stages. How it's sometimes, you know, you can be on a state or temporary state of mind, which is higher or lower than your normal stage of mental cognition or spiritual
And you
attainment.
would say that the guy who took acid who says I'm God is in that state.
You could be in a state of mind that is touching or tangential to that which really truly exists as a real stage that we can interface with. But there's some differences. It's like when you masturbate or something to VR porn.
Never done it.
Yeah, never done it. But when you're doing something like pleasuring yourself to VR porn, it's so similar to the real thing, but it's just a projection or like a model of that which actually is.
Sure.
And I think sometimes these states of mind are really similar in that way, where the stage, this reality, is one such way, and the state that is close to it that you can attain in these temporary heightened experiences, or even lower experiences if you're addicted to drugs or having bad things happen to you or whatever. They're very similar but not the same thing. And so when I think about the Messiah or this Christ consciousness that one person can achieve through meditation or psychedelics or whatever, depending on how you attain it, depends on how real or reified it actually is for you. And that in lies the difference. I think maybe if some person actually achieves that stage, and not very many people do in the world, maybe they can call themselves something like a Messiah. Maybe the Messiah is even one step further than that.
Well, there's a dichotomy there's a difference between a prophet and a Messiah.
Yeah.
A lot of Jews will say Jesus was a great prophet,
right,
but wasn't the Messiah.
The Messiah, right. Yeah. And that's the biggest contention between the Jews and the Christians, is whether or not Jesus was the Messiah, who the Messiah is, when will the Messiah appear, and what the function of the Messiah actually is. Do you
think, what are your thoughts on that claim, though? Like, to me, it feels very similar to the Nietzschean claim of the Ubermen and the Ubermensch. It's like one... Are there people out there who are just built in such a way, or maybe have certain life experiences that lead them to be a great prophet or to be the Ubermensch?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's always going to be done by like an individual, right? You always have to take a path as an individual to get to that state of mind or that stage. It's always about inner work, but like the whole question of the Messiah or Messianic tradition comes from cultures and religious centers predicated on a need for salvation, which salvation doesn't necessarily occur across all of the major world religions, but it's almost in all of them, of some way, shape, or form. Whether it's an individual Messiah who comes down and saves you, whether it's you yourself who escapes the matrix and escapes dukkha and all of the suffering, and you achieve enlightenment and nirvana through the escape of this process. There's always some sort of escape or salvation, but in some traditions there isn't. But that's the first big thing for me, is like, first, we have to agree that we need to be saved from something,
right, to
even have a discussion about messiahs. But the question was what again? I'm sorry, I'm losing it today.
Well, why is it different than the idea of you as an individual embodying this Christ consciousness?
Oh,
that is, in a way, it's like you're acting out some kind of theater role, where you're trying to embody something that you are not. But I feel like the stage and state argument was a good answer to that.
Yeah, and then you brought up the point of prophets, right? So perhaps any individual on planet Earth throughout the majority of time can achieve this state of Christ consciousness, of this like uber enlightened state, become the Ubermensch, but they would only be considered prophets or prophetic.
Yes.
That the Messiah has this extra quality about them, that again you have to subscribe to the salvation thing and what you're being saved from, and how the Messiah plays a role in that whole thing. Not any individual can be that.
And that's interesting, because we wanted to have this conversation mostly because we did a live stream where a lot of people were asking about the Messiah complex, and that's a good point. A lot of people who claim that they are the Messiah or that they're supposed to save somebody from something never actually delineate what it is that they're saving us from.
Or they do. Sometimes they do. Like, I have some personal friends who I would deem have Messiah complexes, who feel like truly they were sent here, or that their life's mission is to save the planet or save humankind from evil, from the literal embodiment of evil.
Well, that's pretty vague.
It can be. Yeah. Sometimes they're more of like the Alex Jones predilection to
the
talk
DMT
about
vampires.
Yeah, vampire pedophile demons who have enslaved humanity in a sort of Gnostic sense. Whether or not they have a specific enemy to go after or a specific goal in mind, I feel like it's all misrepresented, misdirected energy, where people have fallen into these pitfalls and these holes. Reading Jordan Peterson's book recently has brought that back to the forefront of my awareness. One of his rules in his previous book said, set your house in perfect order before you try to go out and change the world. And in this one, I think the rule is like... might be rule 8, I think, of the newest text, which is try to make at least one room in your home as beautiful as possible. And he sort of connects the two ideas together, and it leads to this idea of working on yourself before you work on the world. I think what happens a lot of the time where people fall short is they do have knowledge, they do have some religious experience, they do have some thing that has occurred, and they want to share it with people, and they develop a neurotic sense of specialness, like they're special, or they're unique, or they have the truth, they have the one true
true.
And that, I think, is how religious dogma always occurred throughout history.
Right.
You always have a person who has a religious experience, a near-death experience, walking around in the desert too long. You have like some mirage and an angel comes to you or whatever.
Sure.
Or however it happens. And then they go to record that experience and they're so enamored by it and they're so energetically charged. They go to tell the world about it. And then all of a sudden they got broskies on the side of the road who believe them because they trust in their character or whatever. And they're like, this must be true if this guy is talking about it.
Or maybe they just are,
for whatever reason.
Persuasive.
Or some people are just really thirsty and hungry for something in that
right.
era, in that period, in that geographical location. Who knows?
Sure.
And then all of a sudden they start following this person and they start practicing the ritual, and then some emergent process occurs, just like all of reality happens to occur in, and you have some nuance and some complexity arise, and now you've got a whole religious doctrine and dogma that people follow, and it's been 2,000 years and we've slaughtered hell of people for our ideas or whatever. As well as use those ideas to build our culture, our actual buildings we live in, and our family structure, and all the things, tailored our language a bit. And it all comes from these singular experiences. So I can understand why people in today's day and age are susceptible to this idea of being special with special knowledge. It's happened all throughout time.
Well, and also, if there's a societal framework that everybody adheres to, and to a certain degree, we're grateful for the societal framework, but it's also very cookie cutter, right?
Yeah.
Most people think about the same things, right?
Mm-hmm.
What was the score of last night's game? I'm not denigrating that. I'm just saying that
it's easy. It's normal. It's what keeps us grounded and anchored and gives us something to live for and work towards.
Exactly. But the moment you come across some revelation that you realize nobody around in your network knows about, or you have an experience that you suddenly dawns upon you that nobody else has had anything even close to this experience,
right?
You could easily fall into that trap of thinking, well, like, oh, I was chosen, like I was the one who was supposed to have this experience. This revelation was given to me,
right? To me and not them.
Yeah.
So for some reason in my life's experience, I am somehow inclined to be the one who should bear this knowledge and this news and give it to the world, and you feel sacred, or you feel like you have been picked, right?
But the moment that you start studying esoteric knowledge and the occult and Freemasonry and psychedelic literature, I think that is the cure for that, because you realize, oh, I'm not the first, and I'm damn sure not the last.
I think studying in general is the cure for that sort of arrogance, for sure. I know that it's happened to me a couple of times in life. Ever since I was a young boy, I've said on this channel, I started studying real philosophy and getting into altered states of consciousness and psychedelics and organic chemistry and all those cool things when I was 12, when I first picked up DMT, the spirit molecule by Rick Strassman. And I thought I was so special because nobody in my life was on this wave and started doing all these crazy things and psychedelics at a really young age and had these experiences. And I thought that, my ideas were novel and unique and have never graced anyone on planet Earth before. I had some inclination that maybe somebody out there had similar ideas, but I'd never actually been exposed to any of them. So for all I know, like, I don't know, I'm the only one. And then I start reading Ken Wilber and actually picking up some of the great books and works of literature across time that have really changed lives and, really been influential for hundreds of years. And I realized, holy crap, some of my ideas have been talked about not just from one guy, but from multiple dudes, and they all have different words for it. And now we have this thing called the New Age, and there's so many people saying the same shit that I thought that I figured out all on my own. And it was just like a sort of a reality check, for sure.
Yeah. At the very least, though, to maybe stand up for the people who are feeling this way, at the very least it could be some kind of initiation. I mean, that's certainly the feeling that I had when I first came across my first esoteric text by Manly P. Hall or lecture. It felt like I was like I was supposed to come across it, but not for any reason that is to save the world more than anybody else has the capacity to save the world by being the best individual they can be.
So I feel what you're saying. So you feel as though you were not necessarily chosen to save the world, but on your specific journey throughout life, it came to you more than you came to it, and it was meant for you. Maybe you were chosen, or maybe it was some sort of special thing that has been occurring to you, but you didn't take it as far as, oh, I'm going to put all of the problems and struggles of the world on my back and try to justify your behaviors and your thoughts.
And I'm also open to the idea that the reason I came across such an experience or such a piece of literature or lecture or whatever is just randomness.
Because, it could be. You never know. And that definitely is a point of view that some people probably take when it comes to life. that everything is random and there's not anything divine about
it. Just doesn't feel random. It felt like I was at a point where I needed something to change, and that was the factor that really caused me to switch lanes in such a way.
Yeah, maybe you just brought it to yourself.
Maybe
through the quantum waves of manifestation. You thought about it, brought about it.
Like when Jane Gatsby talks about the tractor, like it was just like I was always eventually going to go towards it on my own accord in such a way, but it feels like it came to me. Like it's like an illusion.
Yeah. Well, now we're getting towards the whole determinism thing, right?
Well, yeah, we don't. I'm not gonna touch that one right now.
But reading Jordan Peterson's book again recently reminded me of people's propensity to have illusions of grandeur about themselves, and that's really what I wanted to talk about in this episode today, because I actually have seen more so online than ever before on Reddit forums, personal Facebook, people who are on the comment section of our channel, friends that I know personally in real life, as well as people I only know through Facebook and other social media outlets. Whether or not they've gone full on Messiah complex, they do feel like they have special knowledge that no one else has, that for one reason or the other they want to share. And that's noble when the cause or the motivation is truly trying to help the world, but so often we get trapped in a sort of self-gratifying narcissism, I think we should start with maybe potentially putting forward some theories as to why that is happening at a higher rate now than before. Again, probably just because of the internet and the information age. We talk about it a lot, and there's more out there. There's more access to drugs. There's more access to religious temples, and we can get from point A to point B easily. We have more exposure to ideas. We have more books that we can sift through, as well as if you buy into the whole collective consciousness is just becoming more advanced, then the ideas in I guess the idea pool in the metaphysical space that we're pulling down and interfacing with is more rich than it ever has been, because there is all of this abundance and everyone is interfacing with all these things. So
I think all those things play a role. I have another idea to put forward that may or may not be true, but I think it's possible that people who feel like they need to save something come about when there is a collective idea that something needs saving.
Yes.
And I think that right now, trust in our institutions is at an all-time low. And so it gives people that feeling, well, my institutions are failing me, but nobody's doing anything about it. Maybe I have to be the one to do something about it.
So then you couple that sort of uncomfortability and that anger or dissatisfaction for the status quo on top of the natural propensity for people to interface with these higher than normal or more than normal ideas or supernatural or paranormal thoughts.
And perhaps it's a psychological mechanism from the past that when something is going wrong, you convince yourself that you're going to do everything you can to stop it, and then you don't have to lose as much sleep over it. You think, okay, well, it's at least somebody is trying to deal with the problem.
Yeah. It could be helpful to you. I think oftentimes too it's a form of dissociation. I know that's why I bring up Jordan Peterson's books, because that's mainly what he's talking about in his rules, is that people have their own problems and their own neurotic tendencies, and they sort of strawman their own issues in a sort of way, in a roundabout way, by focusing on the external environment around them instead of focusing on their own problems. And sometimes it makes it easier for them to cope with the fact X, Y, and Z, why they're not successful in life or why they're feeling depressed, and whether or not they've even recognized all of these other contributing factors, like they watch porn, they don't have a job that pays them well, they dropped out of college because they didn't have the wherewithal or maybe the mental stamina and endurance to continue. They have poor diet, whatever the thing might be that's causing them their depression. Maybe they are smart, they are intellectual, they have a high IQ, a high potential.
So it's like a form of overcompensation.
It's like a coping mechanism, because it's almost as if smart individuals, if they're smart but lazy, end up falling into these pitfalls of messianic complexes, because they're lazy. So
high in IQ, low in conscientiousness.
Right, and so they develop these problems mentally or spiritually or whatever because they're buying into ideologies that denigrate social institutions and overgeneralize aspects of the world. And this is what Jordan Peterson gets into a little bit, and we'll talk more about it on the episode where we actually go over his book. But it's almost as if you look out at these problems, these very complex issues, and you hyper reduce them to very simple components that you can then paint over all of your personal problems and blame that institution, or blame the patriarchy, or blame men in general, a whole gender, blame a whole race, blame a whole whatever, and you're looking at all of the things in the world, and it's developing into this weird neurotic pattern. And Messiah complex is probably the pinnacle of all of that, because instead of focusing on the negative over here and doing that whole process to avoid your own issues, you sort of almost, again, narcissistically put yourself at the top of the pedestal and say, I have the knowledge, I have the truth, I will give it to the world.
Yeah, well, that's interesting too. I guess, it depends on how you look at being smart. I think some people think of being smart as someone who knows a lot.
Right,
and that's a murky answer to that. I think being intelligent is about being able to solve problems and being able to, excavate through information in a comprehensive way. But if you have that ability and you've never exercised it, I think that you might be even more susceptible to ideology than someone who's dumb and just doesn't care.
Right.
Doesn't need some one size fits all answer to make it so they can put everything in their mind in a neat little box.
I think all people do that unconsciously.
Yes,
of
course.
I think people with low IQ who aren't as intelligent actually do that more naturally. I think it's an issue.
But it's not as metacognitive.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely an issue that riddles all people, I think, until you do practice getting out of that. You do practice metacognition, and you really look at yourself objectively, and you really do the work. I think intelligent people fall susceptible just as much as people who might be deemed less intelligent. But I guess I'm trying to agree with you.
Yeah.
That intelligent folks, almost to some degree in a different direction, are susceptible. Yeah. But I wouldn't necessarily say more.
Maybe not more frequently, just susceptible in a different way. That probably can manifest in the world more.
Well, yeah, because
than someone who's apathetic.
Right, because those intelligent folks usually have access to more resources. They have better jobs. They have more people in their circle that they can influence.
And also, the way that things get done is just by people thinking it through until the point that it becomes an action. And intelligent people are more likely to contemplate on the idea.
And take some semblance of action.
Yeah, perhaps. Speculation, but perhaps.
So we've talked a little bit about how it's possible that people can fall prey to this sort of archetype of having this messianic complex, thinking that they're the best in one way, shape, or form, spiritually or otherwise, that they're here to save the planet. But if not a messiah complex, there's something to be said about just arrogance in general. Arrogance, airs of superiority, patronizing complexes, thinking that you know more than other people. And one thing that I definitely appreciate about you and the conversations that we've had and episodes we've done is realizing that there's something to be gained from all people and all experiences. And when we did our Facebook Live event, there was a question that someone had asked, which was, okay, about messiah complexes, how can I try to avoid this? How can I be better at recognizing these patterns in myself, and what can I do to fight against that? And I think just recognizing that there will always be someone smarter than you, for one, on whatever it is. There's always going to be a professional who has studied that field more than you.
Right.
Whether it's history, science, mathematics, there will always be someone who can best you. And even if you are the best in the whole entire world for this moment in time, time is fleeting. Your skill set is
someone
fleeting.
Else will come about with it, and they transcend that.
Right. Transcendence is occurring on a daily. Complexity emerges. You have the passing of the flame, so to speak, to the new generations. People are always making breakthroughs, and you will never be number one forever. Right. And there's no way that you could be that. Again, I can't say it in any other way without just reiterating to the nines that you will not be number one forever. So recognizing that is good.
Right.
Although the spirit of competition exists deeply within us.
Right. Well,
and
the want to be better, I think, is good. But how good is the want to be number one? I mean, I guess if you strive to be number one, then you're going to be better than the person who strives to be number 10.
Right. Right. Yeah, usually that's the way it works.
Yeah.
Unless you just unless you don't have that skill in your natural propensity. Maybe you try your hardest and you still fail.
So on one hand, like it is noble to want to save the world, but it brings us back to the Jordan Peterson idea, where it's like, why do you think that you can save the world if your life isn't in perfect order already?
Right. Well, yeah, that's bringing it back to the Messiah for sure. And I guess that would be like the ideal reason for why you should not become a Messiah complex person.
Right.
But I guess what I'm trying to get at more so is just the arrogance. Like, just regular Joe Schmoes who are intelligent, who have an air of arrogance about them. Or a doctor who is a wonderful surgeon, but who talks down to his what are they called? Not the interns, but the attending, what are they called? Man, I don't watch enough Grey's Anatomy. Somebody call Sierra in here.
Yeah.
Whatever those people are called in the medical field who are not yet surgeons but are learning to become surgeons. That's
interns.
But they're not interns. What's the name? What's the word? Oh man, it's like
surgical assistants.
Sure, that's what they do. Man, residents.
Residents.
Damn.
That's right.
They're called residents.
They're getting paid.
Yeah, residents, dude. Jeez, oh my goodness. But the surgeon who talks down to them.
People do it in politics a lot, and I find it really perturbing when someone will point to the other side and say, "Oh, like everybody on that side is dumb." Mm-hmm. It's like you might be able to make an argument that intelligence is correlated to political affiliation,
right?
But it also depends on what you're talking about, like as far as intelligence, because intelligence fragments. There's people who are good with their hands. There's people who are good with their brain. There's people who are good creatively. There's people who are emotionally intelligent, spiritually intelligent, and it goes on forever.
It's all over.
So, but that evidence doesn't exist enough for you to be able to say, well, oh, it's the people, who are watching this network who are the idiots,
Yeah, and so that's another aspect of what we talked about earlier is the overgeneralization and oversimplification and reduction of hypercomplexity.
Now, can we reduce
society.
that to a biological and evolutionary mechanism? Like, what is the utility of that? Because anything that we do,
it's just easier.
Was somehow ensconced in our evolution.
It's just easier. That's why Jordan Peterson says, or I think it was him, that intelligent people who are intelligent but also lazy are susceptible to these sort of complexes because it just is easier.
Right.
Because as we've said in other episodes, life is complex.
Yeah.
Society is complex. Humanity is complex. But we're also simple. So if you're taking one of the roads, the difficult path or the simple path, well, we'll just take the simple path and lump everything up, and then we'll make these huge assumptions about the nature of reality and paint these very simple things across all of our opinions, and then we'll just call it good.
It's like when he did that GQ interview where that girl, she was like the boss level of a Kathy Newman. She was better than Kathy Newman, but she was still like super low resolution in my opinion. But she was talking about the patriarchal tyranny, and he was like, they were talking, and she brought up something, and he brought up something, and she was like, well, that's just another example of the patriarchal tyranny, and he's like, well, that's really convenient. Because it's so easy. Now, anytime something happens, you just have to think one thing. Like you can attribute it to one thing, and the conversation is over.
That's why his rule literally states abandon ideology. It's one of the facets of that rule.
Right.
And I think that level of simplifying the world is a mistake, but it's something that we all do unconsciously. But if you are aware of that, it will help you to not be as arrogant as you may have been before.
Right. Because no matter what, if you are dropping knowledge on people that they've never come across that field or facet of information, I feel like people are automatically, at least in my own experiences, I feel like if I'm trying to hit somebody with a level of nuance that I know for sure that they've never had a discussion about, they give me a look like, oh, you're being arrogant.
Or sometimes
but I'm not
they feel
trying
like
to be arrogant.
You're talking down to them.
I'm not trying to, though. I'm just trying
condescending.
To give you my honest and legitimate answer to whatever question you pose to me.
Which how we display ourselves, how we actually have communication is important for sure. And there are people who will just, no matter what you do, they'll be sensitive, and you just can't escape that. But I guess if you're not being arrogant, or if you're not intending to, then that's a whole nother conversation. Maybe you need to improve your communication.
That's what I was gonna say. Is like when we had that conversation with Rabbi Simone Jacobson, I felt like he was being very staunch about his positions, very clear. Like, no, this is what I think, and I'm gonna tell you how I think it is. But there was no arrogance.
Yep.
It was just pure, humble honesty.
Super important.
Yeah.
And I've heard some positive feedback on our channel that here, when we talk about certain ideas, people don't feel as if we're speaking down to them, even if we somewhat display an air of, I have this knowledge that you don't.
Right.
And so maybe, developing better communication is really important.
Well, I always assume that we're bringing up Jordan Peterson a lot, but I really do always assume that just because it's a little different than Jordan Peterson's idea of assume the person knows something you don't.
Yeah.
It's that even if I assume that I know more about someone as it pertains to philosophy, I know with 100% definitiveness that they know something about something else that I certainly don't know.
Yeah, for sure.
Because we all have different life experiences.
And so, yeah, it's sort of like the master becomes a student and the student becomes a master. I think if you really embody that principle, even if you are a master of your craft or your field or whatever it is, if you become stagnant in your mastery, then you truly are a fool.
Right.
But if you're always open to new ideas, always open to differences of opinion, always open to self-improvement and recognizing your own faults and pitfalls, as you are a master, you will always grow and you'll continue to be, instead of a fool, just like the real actual archetype of the fool, but in the positive sphere. Right. You will always be open. You'll always be loving and kind. And I think that is the biggest thing that you could do to sort of bat off and ward against falling into that Messiah complex.
Yeah.
Again.
Now, my fear, sorry to change the subject a little bit. Have you ever seen the show Messiah, The Messiah on Netflix?
No, but I've wanted to.
It's a fantastic show. It's about the second coming of Jesus in today's world, where like the government is tracking him, keeping an eye on what he's up to. And
right, what would it look like in the modern era if the Messiah truly appeared?
Yes, and so he does all these things. He walks on water. He heals people who have just been shot and lit up with AKs and stuff like that.
Whoa.
It's crazy. We're so skeptical in this modern age that if the Messiah did come, which is bringing us back full circle to my question
very
in the
first
beginning,
question,
what would it take for us to believe them? And how many of us would just be like, you know, dude, it's another David Blaine?
Yeah, because my initial reaction to that question, I wasn't prepared for it, was just, dude, I don't know, man, because I was thinking smoke and mirrors, visual effects, videos, imagery, Photoshop.
Taking advantage of our psychology to do trickery.
I'm like, dude, even if you touched me and gave me a psychedelic experience, I'd wonder if you had like some sort of weird cream on your finger or something.
Yeah. Or like, if you touched my zit on my forehead and it went away, I'd think you have like, proactive on your finger.
Or you snap your fingers and an explosion happened. Well, you had your homie set up with some TNT like Wile E. Coyote over there.
We would never know.
There's so much skepticism. That is true. But I mean, I'm skeptical of my friends who say that they're the Messiah. Maybe they are.
Well, they're not causing explosions walking on water, so that's warranted.
Who knows? Maybe, maybe they're just kind of sitting around.
Or maybe they can only do it when you're not looking.
That's the rule.
Says every Messiah.
That's the Matrix rule.
Yeah.
Oh man. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, skepticism is a big deal. Even if the Messiah was here, I don't think that we would know. But that's funny, though, to shout out Rabbi Jacob or Simone Jacobson, we had discussed from a Judaic perspective when they would feel as if the Messiah would come. And one of the things is that the whole world wants to study and convert to Judaism and sort of mingle with the Jews and learn from them and study Kabbalah and all these things. And
well, that would be an interesting phenomenon. I got it. If the Messiah could look at anybody in the world and make them cry on the spot with a look, I'd believe it.
5G networks, man. I don't know. Sonic boom technology, bro. Like, who knows, dude?
No.
You can never tell. Like, what is the criteria for us to say that, okay, yep, you're the Messiah? And I think that so many people don't even buy into faith, and that's why I brought it up earlier, is so many people don't even buy into a faith or construction or a mode of thinking in which salvation is needed. In this new age, those people who feel like, oh, we're all an emergent process, we're all the universe experiencing itself, there is no need for me to escape or to be saved from myself because it's all me. And some of those people don't even buy into revelation or salvation or anything like that. So they might not even care about this conversation. But to remove ourselves from the religious undertones of messiahs, and we've already covered a little bit of like the Messiah complexities that regular Joe Schmoes might run into and why that is, and a little bit about how to deter ourselves from falling into those pitfalls. Is there anything else to be said about this topic, or are we nearing the end of it? Do you have any other ideas that you want to flesh out?
It's kind of embarrassing. I remember when I first started reading, going to the library, taking psychedelics, realizing that I was thinking about things that most people in my life weren't thinking about. I remember going to the beach by my house, or like a river that looked like a beach, and with a selfie stick, walking down by myself these trails where there's other people there, and I'm just talking about crazy shit, super probably hyperbolic pseudoscience stuff. And, I'm uploading them on YouTube, Facebook, and I'm wondering, like, I'm saying it. Like, I'm saying it. Why are people not vibing with it or resonating with it? Like, why isn't it getting, like, this should be like viral right now.
Sure.
And it was like, it wasn't until later where I became more seasoned where I was like, oh, you can't just, spew it all out and expect everybody to resonate with it. You have to like, that's why I got addicted to the podcast format shortly after, because I realized like, oh, you have to like build a foundation before you can just,
So I think what you're touching on there is a part of the narcissism. It's like a little bit of it is a neediness or like a seeking of attention.
I don't think that's what I was doing though. I think
consciously, maybe unconsciously.
Maybe unconsciously, but like I really thought like if only the people in my life knew what I had experienced and what I had come across, they would be like, "Oh, I get it now."
Yeah, so a little bit to go back to the whole why religions pop up when people are like, "Oh, I'm so excited to tell everyone in the whole world these ideas." Yeah, I think that there's a little bit of that for sure. It's just like the same time that the first time you ever do a psychedelic, you're going to want to tell all your friends who are open to it. The first time that you have a cool experience. So I see that. But I definitely think a lot of the messianic complexes out there come from that same energy, but a little bit of that tendency to need attention. Yeah. Or to fill a hole inside of themselves and to feel special.
I probably wanted attention, for sure. Bit, I mean, there's always that aspect of it. But I think my conscious goal was I just want them to know what I know, and if only they had even been exposed to it, they would be like, "Oh, I'm with you 100%."
Yeah. So on that end of the coin, in further study of like the occult and esoteric knowledge and practices, the study, whoever is performing the study, I don't mean to say like me as an occultist, but you begin to learn that everyone's on different levels and different wavelengths, and somehow, some way, there is a degree in which you cannot just tell someone the truth. There's knowledge. The Gautama Buddha, the first ever Buddha, said that wisdom cannot be spoken. To some level, going out into the world and trying to spew it all out at everyone all at once on the street, you would be not only ridiculed because the Matrix works like that. People don't want to be woken up from their slumber in the physical reality or otherwise. When you're sound asleep, you kind of get pissed off when someone tries to jar you awake and you're not ready to wake up yet and you weren't planning on it. But it's just like that level of excitement makes sense. But I think that as you grow and learn more and study more, you do recognize that everyone will come to the knowledge in time when they're ready on their path, kind of just like you did. I know some people out there subscribe to the idea of cosmic clockwork, that in general you can have individuals that are on different levels, but it doesn't matter when you look at reality from a collective standpoint. There are eras and epochs in time which are unchangeable, which will always happen, like patterns or clockwork. And sort of accepting, I guess, that things will be whether or not you affect those things. And sometimes I think that also helps deter a messianic complex from happening, even if those people have incredible knowledge. It's almost humbling. I guess what I'm trying to do is tackle all the ways in which we can avoid becoming this way. Because even in an innocent example like you gave, I think that there's some semblance of like, and even if you didn't mean it, it's just like a wanting to be the best, like wanting to be the best.
Well, and I think the ultimate lesson for me was when I eventually realized, and it dawned on me, that it's not a bad thing to not care about those types of things that I was espousing at the time.
And I think we should care. That's why we do everything that we do on this channel, which I see parallels, right? Like we make a post, we want people to see it, we want exposure.
Do you think there's something wrong though with people who just want to conserve their framework of being and keep watching the sports and making that the centerpiece of their life?
I used to denigrate those people and have an air of superiority myself. I used to look down on people like that. But after some time in life, I realized that through my own belief system, my own philosophy, all things sort of go back to source in the end, and all things come from a unified oneness. And that does mean, for me, that it's okay if people are this way or that way, or if they're wrong or they're right, or I'm wrong or I'm right. There's a danger there because there's extra bits that you have to add on to that philosophical reasoning in order to come to the conclusion that not to come to the conclusion that nothing matters, but to come to the conclusion that even though everything will be good, even though it's okay that evil exists, it's okay that these guys over here are on the wrong quote unquote path, and have the motivation to do something different with yourself, that it's still important. But to come to that conclusion, again, it takes more pieces of the puzzle, but that's how I mitigate that hatred or that contempt for those sorts of people who are in the mundane, who are in the here and now, who really are somewhat basic and somewhat, living off the circus and bread, to put it in a sort of Machiavellian sense or whatever. But
right.
Again, yeah, it's just the way I combat it personally is to just recognize that all things are on their paths and it's okay.
Right.
And so that helps me not look down on people. It also helps me forgive myself when I make mistakes or when I'm not necessarily on my best path.
And you also have to think about the time in your life when you were at that phase where you were watching TV all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And you kind of have to wonder, if I didn't have every single experience that I had in life exactly the way that it transpired, would I have ever come across that revelation? And so you kind of have to give other people that same grace. Like if they're indulging in drug use or some behavior that's pathological or that you don't agree with, you have to wonder, is that leading them to the truth?
Yeah, like everything's perfectly on its path. It's sort of an optimistic way to look at the world.
then it's supposed to be.
Yeah. Well, because most of the people who develop these complexes definitely seem to have a pessimistic viewpoint. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, the world is in shambles, or oh, these people need to be saved because they don't know any better and they're dumb or evil or susceptible to corruption or whatever the negative aspect is. But if you have this optimistic viewpoint in the way that we're describing, I think it does help mitigate that a little bit, because you recognize that it's okay that people are making mistakes, and it's okay that half the population is enslaved by archonic overlords or whatever. Maybe it's our path. Maybe, again, it's that cosmic clockwork that we're on, and it's not our duty to really change it. We do what we can, right?
Right.
You and I are sitting here having conversations. We're studying. We're writing. We're doing things.
And even then, I think the world today is better in a lot of ways. I think people who say the world is in shambles are just ignorant to realize that the world is a set of shambles, and it always has been.
Yeah, I think that ultimately the difference lies in the intention behind spreading the word. Because like you want to teach people, you want to learn yourself, you want to become better, and it does matter to you, even though you've kind of reconciled with your optimistic viewpoint that it's okay that things aren't as good as they could possibly be. We're all working towards it.
Right.
And the journey is often more important than the destination. And so it's okay that all the things are happening the way that they're happening. But that all being said, the difference, again, lies in the motivation behind why.
Right.
So are you wanting to be the best? Do you have this weird neurotic tendency to need attention? Do you want the glory for your knowledge? Do you want to be recognized or given credit for your ideas? Or do you truly just want to open source help the planet in a sort of altruistic manner? And I think that if it's the latter, then there's a huge difference between literally going out into the world and telling people things that you think that they need to hear, or trying to make changes in the world, even before getting your own house in perfect order, even if you don't follow Jordan Peterson's rule necessarily. If your motivation is correct, truly correct, then I think that it's not as bad. It's not as bad. Although, even if your motivation
I think that to even be able to get into podcasting or making videos, there has to be some level of like, maybe it's not me that wants the attention, but I want the ideas to have attention.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's something to be said about ambition and
right.
We can talk more about that.
Well, I'll tell you this too, anecdotally, is that when I first started doing podcasts after I had, my revelatory experiences, I thought when I would go into these conversations, I'd be like, oh, well, they're going to definitely resonate with what I say.
Yeah.
And then I realized, oh, like they actually have a point as to why it could not be true. And then you refine it from there, So I think one of the things that you're getting at is it's better not to just spew what you think but to build the foundation with the people around you so that you can actually build an empire on top of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's all baby steps. And I think that if you are willing to admit that you need to take those baby steps, you'll realize that you're just a human being.
Right.
You're not necessarily the Messiah.
Right.
You're not the one. We all have lived on this planet for less than 30,000 days. That's something that I always tell myself to sort of like keep myself in check. We're all constantly reinventing the wheel. We all have to read books. We all have to learn from our own personal experience. We all have to learn by by making mistakes through trial and error.
Right.
And it proves with beyond a shadow of a doubt that we are fallible beings, that we are limited beings, that we are susceptible to corruption, that we don't know everything, that our knowledge and our effort and our potentiality has a limit.
Right.
And when I remind myself, you've been alive for less than 30,000 days, 30,000 times that you've slept and woken up, not counting naps, it's kind of humbling. It's like, man, the world is so much older than I am. Things are so much older. These institutions are so much larger.
These ideas are so much older.
Exactly. These archetypes permeate reality at a level that I couldn't even, I mean, and so do you, so to speak. Like, at the foundation of who you are and what you are just as old as the cosmos itself. But in terms of your actual egoic, personal awareness of yourself, that is pretty finite and pretty new to the planet. And so that being said, unless you're some extreme indigo child who is born with all knowledge of the whole world stored in your brain through some like internet device that allows you to see all of history and all of mankind's entire life through some hyperdimensional construct, then and only then will I think you be able to say in some confidence that you might be the Messiah.
Right.
But until then, if you have this limited construction, if you have this limited mind state, if you have all these things that make humanity human, you're just a normal guy, man. And you might be intelligent and you might know.
Well, ultimately, I think that to be the Messiah, you are by definition omniscient and omnipotent in such a way where, you know, even though take for example like Jesus Christ, even though he made mistakes to a small degree, it's always been acknowledged by the doctrine that he could have easily transcended manhood and become a god in that moment.
Right.
And if you can't do that at any moment in your life,
yeah,
if you can't extricate yourself from your flaws and your problems, then you're probably not the Messiah.
Yeah, probably not. Yeah, the Bible says he was without sin, and that he tolerated through graciousness, and that was the cost for the sins of the world, right? Like this God that could snap their fingers and have everyone just like lay and bow at your feet and press their face against the earth through your force of will, usurping all of theirs. You don't, and you just allow them to kill you and torture you because you love them.
So it's a paradox, right? Because for one, if you did that, you're probably also not the Messiah. But if you can't do that, you're also probably not the Messiah.
Yeah, it's this weird middle way of sort of just letting things be as they're happening despite your immense power or knowledge. And that's sort of the Christ consciousness, the middle way. That's sort of the graciousness, how we were talking about earlier, just letting the world be as it is, you know,
right?
Just coming to terms with everything being okay. But that, again, and it can't be stressed enough, does not mean that we shouldn't try to be better or rid the world of evil or help other people. It just means that we're like personally in our hearts, souls, and minds okay with the fact that we are limited and there's a limit to what we can do. So all of the things that we talked about are how I try my best to keep myself in check such that I don't fall prey to my own human errors and become arrogant with everything that I'm learning on a day-to-day basis. I'm trying my best, so that's how it helps me.
Well, if you made this way to the end of the episode, of course, we always like to say how much we appreciate you guys, how much we love you guys. You guys keep the lights on in here, so thank you. And with that being said,
I'd like to thank you for joining us and continuing the great conversation.